This is the kickoff to a series of videos on Acido, the 303s, high pH shit. Yeah, what we're gonna do with this video is we're gonna talk about some of the stuff that's on the market if you're a hardware person to do acid music. Specifically, we're gonna talk about the Behringer TD-3. We're gonna talk about the Roland TB-03. And we're gonna talk about the Erica Synths DB-01. And on this one, we're gonna do some cool shit. One, we're gonna do like a head-to-head on the TB-03 and the TD-3. We're gonna set up everything so it has the same sequence, same settings. We're gonna demo the distortions against each other. We're gonna really work to make it so that you can really get a feel for what each one does and hear it, right? That's really the key. But I'm gonna describe it first. Then we're also gonna take a look at the DB-01. The DB-01 is gonna be a focus of some videos to come as well. This is a badass unit, and if you are not looking necessarily for nostalgia, but you're looking for just like the biggest fucking gun in the world for acid music, this is it. This is the king. This is the baseline de jour 2021. You're not getting something better than this, okay? You are. I don't know. It's kind of an opinion thing. Anyway, I don't know why I talked like that. I'm actually a pretty normal person. Seriously, I cannot keep these glasses. All right, so let's talk about acid music. Acid music started in Chicago. DJ Pierre, Future. Yeah, they took a 303. It was cheap. They found it at a pawn shop. And because it was cheap, they were able to use it, and they found that it had some really unique properties that had never been used before. There are some people who think that potentially acid music started somewhere else. There was a fellow in India who did the ragas, right? He took existing music and used Roland gear, including a 303, to make it. Did it about the same time. I exclude that. It's interesting, but it is not part of acid's history. It influenced nothing. No artists heard it and said, let's continue making this music. The entire tradition of acid-based music that we are talking about, acid techno, acid house, trance that uses 303s, that entire tradition had nothing to do with the ragas. So we're putting that off to the side. What'd they do? Well, here's the interesting thing about Roland 303. And what makes it interesting and why it worked so well is because the sequencer. I know everyone's looking for the tone, but the sequencer is like 60% of it. It's so important. 16th notes. That's the basis. You're talking about a bass line with 16th notes. You're talking about a sequencer on device that is going to allow you to do unique things, right? So the accent knob adds expressivity while retaining a very machine-driven feel. Slide. So the slide, if you take a look at the way the MIDI works, when you have that slide program, it affects the MIDI and then it adds portamento. So what it's doing is it's taking the signal to trigger the next note and the first note and overlapping them a little bit and then adding some portamento, so it slides up. That's unique, it's hardwired onto here. It has a cheap filter, but one that sounds awesome, and it's the squelch that comes off of it that got so famous. The TD-3 and the TB-03 both contain all these features. They both are wonderful, nostalgic sounding. They are able to capture that classic Roland vintage sound quite well. Neither one is a bad option. They try to model not only the feature set, but the sounds as well. Roland is digital. Behringer's is analog. I'm an analog freak. You'd think I'd like the Behringer one more. When you watch the video, you'll see kind of it's a give and take between the two. Anyone who says that one of them is definitively better than the other is straight up lying, because I will spoil this video for you right now. The TB-03 sounds like how Roland thinks a 303 sounds based on the recordings that it's been in famously. So they modeled it to do that, and it sounds awesome. The TD-3 by Behringer does not sound like that. I am recording, yeah. What it sounds like is an analog. It has a buzz, it has a rawness. There's no control to the tone. And so here's the thing, here's the spoiler. Roland TB-03 sounds better about 70% of the time. The TD-3 by Behringer, especially when you hit the low notes on the triangle, when you start closing up the filter, it starts to lose coherence to the tone, and it's not a very desirable sound. But, so while 70% of the time you're winning with the TB-03, there's some things that the TD-3 does, sound-wise, that are way better. It has a snappier envelope. When you start to pull the resonance up, it sparkles a little bit more. The squelch is a little bit sharper. The accent works. Let's talk about that. The accent, you're going to hear this later, on the TB-03, it doesn't do shit, okay? You can program accents all you want. It's not doing anything. You can turn that accent knob up, down. I defy anybody to say they actually hear it. And it works on this. So that's literally a big advantage. It seems to me like it has more of its own character and its own tone. But the reason I did this is because these two synths get confused a lot and talked about a lot as to which one's better. And I've never seen a straight up head-to-head comparison of them. About a year and a half ago, when I first got the TD-3, maybe a year ago, I don't know, somewhere around there, right when we all went inside, I did a stream with both of them on it, but I still programmed individual sequences and tweaked them differently, right? So while they're playing alongside each other, they were doing different things. So the intention of this video was to approach them both and program the same exact sequence onto them, and I do that. And I also do that with the bass line, with the DB-01. And then to add in accents, slides, timing, and get the settings done identically. I do not do that with the DB-01. The Erica DB-01 is such a very different instrument that you can't really, it would be absolutely totally an irritating experience trying to make it do the same exact thing that these do. Don't even try it. So I filmed it over the course of 2 days. Video 1, I think I got through distortion. So we programmed 16th notes and then we run distortion. So what you hear on video 2, and I don't know, maybe I'll edit this into video 2, is you hear me trying to then match up the sequence, which is kind of a bitch. It's not easy to do. When people say that they use the Roland 303 and it's a happy accident machine, what they mean is you can somewhat get some of the tonality out of it that you want. You could start to build up harmonic and chord structures, but what you're really going to end up doing is you're going to start running through it quickly, laying down slides, octaves, and different rhythmic patterns. And then if it doesn't work out, you kind of go back and you do it again and you get closer and closer. It's kind of an iterative art form. Anyone who's ever programmed a 303, a TB-03, or a TD-3, or any of the other clones knows what I'm talking about. The end result isn't exactly deliberate. It's the result of interacting with the machine. And that's a beautiful thing. That's something that's wonderful. The machine plays you back. What could be better? But it also means it's really hard to replicate, right? So taking it from one to the other is just not fun. You will see my struggle on that video. The bass line by Erica has every single feature that the Roland 303 comes with. And then it adds like 10 other tricks. And those tricks that it adds come in two flavors. Timbrality, I'm not sure. And sequencer tricks. All right, so what I mean there is, those are like the two things that make the 303 a 303, right? The sequencer and the timbre, right? I'm not exactly breaking new ground here, but the sequencer on the 303 has accent, slide, and timing, notes, all that, but the accent and slide do unique things that interact with the synth. Okay, so what the DB-01 does is it says, all right, you get accent, slide, we also give you a bunch more. Mod, pitch envelope, last step, play mode, scale, arpeggio, an LFO, different ways of affecting the sequence that are akin in style, inspired by, and go much further in creativity and expressivity than the original 303 design. Then there's timbrality. First off, it has a different filter. It has the Polyvox filter. It's the acid box filter. Erica is really planting their flag with this sound, and it sounds awesome. It keeps the bass fat no matter how much you pitch up the resonance, so you can make it scream. And then it adds on to it drive, sub noise. None of those are things that are present on these, though they both now have distortions on them. Let's call that the Josh Wink effect. It also has a detune. It has, instead of one envelope, 3, so one for VCA envelope, and then envelope level. So this one is the speed, and then this is depth, whereas this is just depth, and then decay affects speed, but you can now affect decay of the note differently, right? Because you have a VCA. So very different. Adds also a triangle. Adds a bandpass filter. So it takes everything that's in these, and then it loads them up over here and makes it work. And it goes many dimensions further. The next sequence of series that I'm going to do is going to explore acid techno. That's my jam. I'm from Chicago. This is the stuff I listened to when I was a kid. There's some stylistic things, some elements of style that we're going to go over in future videos. We're going to go over the drums, the samples. We're going to go over some of the patterns that you build. There's a UK tradition that's much faster and more aggressive. I'm not going to go there. It's not what I do. I play the Chicago style. And we're going to show you how you can, over the series of these next videos, do that on the Erica and then take it to another dimension by utilizing all the different features and all the different timbres that you can pull off of this very sophisticated synth engine. Anyway, I hope you enjoy. Let's do this. Out. Try again. Yes. 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 No. No, that should be fun. Yeah, I did it. Okay, yes. What up? We're jumping right in. A little bit of a time warp. Right now, what we're actually covering is we're covering the synth engine. So that's cutoff, resonance, envelope, decay, accent, and then we're going to go into distortion as well. All right? So right now we have identical sequences set up, and we're going to A-B them so you can hear the difference. Yeah, and full disclosure, I already shot this part of the video, and I did it with 16th notes, but you can't hear it because I didn't catch the audio. Yeah. So here's one major difference for the rest of the video, or for this part of the video, is I took the Erica out and patched them both directly in here. That way I could do easier A-B. So on that note, there's our sequence. Right now you're hearing it on the TD-3. Now you're hearing it on the TB-03. TD-3, TD-03. I'm going to turn the drums down because this is really not about my jam. It's about comparing and contrasting the two. All right, so right now you are hearing TB-03, TD-3. Okay, now we're going to open up the cutoff on both of them halfway. That's the TD-3. And now TB-03. TD-3 is a little grungier right now at about halfway. Yeah, it's about halfway, a little above, but switched again. Now we're on to TB-03. Open it all the way. Gonna open this one all the way, and I'm gonna A-B it again. Ready? We're going from TB-03 to TD-3, and switch. Switch again. They sound very similar. Let's try square waves. TB-03, TD-3. Sounds way different now. More coherence, less distortion. It's holding together on the lows better. A little more smack on the harmonics. This one's analog, so it's a little bit looser. Alright, I'm turning envelope going up quite a bit. Gonna take it up to halfway, and I'm gonna turn the cutoff. Let's see, we're gonna turn the cutoff to right here, and the envelope to right here. Let's do the same. Alright, TD-3 to TB-03. Let me see. Let's get that a little closer. See, right now we're using incremental measurements on the knobs, so it's imperfect. And switching from TD3 or TB-03 to TD3. Ready? TB-03 now, and switching to TD3. All right, now we're gonna bring up resonance halfway. Yeah, now you're starting to get that punch halfway on this as well. All right, switching from TB-03, or I'm sorry, TD3 to TB-03 in 5, 4, 3, 2. Now it sounds way different. This one, it has a rounder sound. That envelope is not as snappy. It sounds a little bit more like what you think of a 303 sounding like. This is more open sounding. Alright, so the curves and the knobs are different. So what? Let's crank the envelope. Lower the cutoff a lot. Gonna crank the envelope and lower the cutoff on the other one, on the TB-03. Going from TD3 to TB-03 and switch. Did you hear it? Right now we're on TB-03. And switching, TB-03 going to TD-3 in 5, 4, 3, 2. Sounds very different. Much different response on the envelope is what I'm really hearing. Alright, we're gonna throw the decay out quite a bit. Alright, so the slide is really important in acid music. The slide happens when you sequence it too. It's that bow wow, bow wow, right there. Bow wow, bow wow. Yeah. Alright, so I have it all the way up here, decay. So what the decay knob does is it affects the length of the note in the envelope. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and. Different character. Now we're going to crank the accent. So here's something to note. You really can't hear the accent having been cranked at all when you have the cutoff up. All the accent here is really triggering, I think, is just envelope mod. Switch. 5, 4, 3, TD-3. Switched. Turn the accent off. Triggers that envelope really strong. When we have the cutoff up, you can still hear it. Alright, we'll turn resonance all the way up. And we're going to turn cutoff down. We want to measure squelches. Alright. TD-3 going to TB-03 in 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and. We're now in TB-03. It's not as fat. Let's switch to saw. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now you're starting to hear some major differences. Do you hear how the resonance is really starting to cut hard on the TD-3? Okay, so there's a few pieces here that we gotta really talk about. First off, the accent doesn't do that much on the TB-03. It really doesn't do much if you have the cutoff up. You can, however, hear it on the TD-3. Second, when you had the TD-3 without too much modulation going on square, it sounded pretty ugly. This sounded really good. However, the big difference is once you start adding in the modulation, this sounds a lot juicier. Guess who's back? Battery died. All right, so we're going to cover distortions now. They both come with onboard distortion. This is the Josh Wink effect. Josh Wink famously took a Roland TB-303 and ran it through a distortion pedal, and that created a screaming sound because it accentuated the harmonics that was produced by it when you crank the resonance. So the squelch became a scream. We're going to do that on these devices. Alright, you're hearing nothing right now. Right now you're hearing the TB-03. There are other distortions. So there are 3 distortions on board. They're all digital on here. You hit function. And you scroll through to 0D. And it changes them. So you turn to halfway, so you hear changes. There's like the lows and the highs. Full. More of an overdrive than a fuzz. Cranking it, hearing it crank. I like number 2. Alright, the Behringer TD-3. Oole, oole. Has distortion. I have no level on it. Turn that up. It only has 1 distortion, but you can affect the tone and the amount. Here's a curious design choice. You have distortion, tone. So distortion is how much you drive the circuit. Tone is than something like an EQing tilts the tonality, the center of it. Level then is just literally a level. So what I don't really understand is why when you turn it on, you have a separate level when the level's already set here. It seems extraneous, but what? Sweeping the tone. I'm trying to find sweet spots. Yeah, that's a sweet spot. Let's try to read it over here. And switching over to TB-03 and let's see if we can get that on the TD-3. Can't seem to find that sound. Let's hear it again. Back to TB-03. It makes the bed sound really nice. Very Daft Punk sounding. Back to the TD-3. Switching it off. All right, job here is done. We've covered the synth section on both. The synth section, I believe on its own, on the TD-03 sounds pretty good. I'm not a huge fan of the sawtooth. Oh, holy shit, hold on, let me try one thing. That's TB-03 and over to the TD-3. can't seem to find that same sound. I just can't seem to get it to do the same sound on both. But that's all right. They have different overdrive circuits. That's literally the point. They give you diversity in sound. This one is analog. It sounds analog. And guess what? You don't even have to use either one of these distortions. You can add your own. I have these both plugged into the Decay Force. It has several distortion algorithms. I could use those if I wanted to. I could use the ones that are on board. This one has 3 of them. That's a little bit more. Okay, but they sound different. They just do. This sounds to me in my head what a 303 sounds like when it's recorded. This to me sounds more analog. It doesn't exactly sound like a 303, but it sounds like something approaching a 303. And we're not even talking about the Erica Synth. The Erica Synth DB-01 is a totally different beast. Gotta dust it. Anyway, thanks for watching. This has been the Distortion and Synth section. Alright, it should be pretty obvious now the massive differences in tone between the TD-3 and the TB-03 from Roland. They're very different before you start to talk about additional functionality. And the additional functionality is not something to totally overlook either, because there is good additional functionality. In this, the TB-03 really does shine. It not only looks great, it has a sturdier build, but also it's got a few things inside of it that the TB-03 just doesn't have. It has 3 distortion types. We already took a look at those. It also has a delay or a reverb. So just listening to that, that adds a whole nother trick to your toolkit. We're going to change delay type. There's a tape delay type, so we change the timing on it. Here's the digital one. That one keeps the pitch the same. Here's the reverb. I love the reverb on this thing. It sucks. This reverb is terrible, but it creates this awesome fill moment that you can do. That's cool. Okay, these are extra features. This stuff is not on the TD-03. It's unfair to compare the two. You could certainly get reverb and delay effects onto it using something like the Decay Force, using pedals. There's 1,000 roads in Rome, and you can certainly do that, but it comes with it. That's a value. And there's no doubt about it. That's a cool effect. The delay I find on this thing is a little bit fiddly. It never really locks in great. I use it to create comb filters, but mostly I end up keeping it just straight up on reverb so I can do that quick feedback wash with the long reverb time because it creates that ghostly tone. All right, now on to Erica. We're gonna quickly go over what's on Erica. There's a whole another series of videos that's gonna come out that's gonna talk about it because of these 3, this is the champ, okay? This is the nostalgia. And this is your low-cost superstar, as well as your modifiable unit de jour. This thing's cool if you want to get something and get into acid at a low cost. It also sounds pretty cool, but it doesn't really sound like a 303. It does sound more analog, but take that for what it's worth. And I'm totally excluding the ethics of Uli Behringer cloning things. I don't personally have a problem with him cloning the 303, actually. My issues with Uli extend onto other devices, but I think that this one didn't bother me. Bothered me enough I put a sticker over his logo, though. That's a Mio Now sticker. He's a guy in the Golden Shrimp Guild, and he rules. I'd rather look at that than Uli. Okay, setting Uli aside, this thing is at a disposable price. You can get them for $100 regularly, and it's pretty easy to modify them, and there's an entire modding community that is growing out of that with all sorts of switches. And that's what I plan on actually doing with mine. And if I fuck it up, I don't really care, because guess what? $100. If I can maybe come out with like a superstar device, I'm gonna try that. And it'll also be awesome because it'll be something that I contracted to have done. This thing, the Roland TB-03, sounds like how Roland thinks a 303 sounds. It's faithful to the sound of it having been recorded. It also operates off battery power, and it's a lot of fun to sit on the couch and just quickly jam. It has a little speaker on it. It has some noise issues, okay? If you're hearing noise in this video, that's it. Bye-bye. These noise issues disappear in my main rig because I have it hooked up via USB to my mixer. And I use the IRA protocol, and that generally gets rid of that line noise that you hear. But that ain't great. There's no way around it. That's not awesome. This does not suffer from that. This is the champ, though. There's nothing about these that this can't do, and then some. Next video. All right, what we're gonna do now is we're gonna talk about the Erica Synths DB-01, and we're gonna do an entire series of videos focusing on it. So we're gonna go a little bit quickly, and then we're gonna build up a jam, and that's how we're gonna finish this whole thing out. I'm gonna add some more drums to it too. This is the ultimate acid device. All right, I'm putting that out there. Throwing down the gauntlet, giving it to you all. You can make an acid device out of anything. Generally speaking, the acid sound is contained with a 1 oscillator monosynth, having a saw or square wave option, cutoff resonance envelope. That's the basics. You get those pieces down, you can do a pattern that's inspired by old acid house, acid techno, 16th notes, or even go for the overseas stuff that hits 140, 150 BPM, or the trance stuff that's a little bit dreamier, maybe not even sequenced on the device. But the acid sound is, in it on its own, relatively simple. The thing that made it so interesting was the interplay between the sequencer and the device. It's not like the oscillator in here is some kind of magic oscillator that pulls out of its ass these magical tones that can never be recreated. No, what Roland did was cool. They said, hey, we can do something with the sequencer, with the slides, with the accents, and how it reacts to octaves, that makes it do neat things tonally. And that really hadn't been done before. There was nothing that had on the sequencer step sequencing that would trigger off an accent, work with the decays, or how fast the envelope would happen with the decay. Okay, so that made this interesting. It made it something that would evolve over time. It was then picked up and used by house and psychedelic movements. None of that philosophy or feature set is missing from the Erica. It's said that this has a 18 decibel cutoff filter. It's a transistor filter. It's cheap. And it's actually specified differently, but people have measured it and it actually has an 18 decibel runoff. Erica went a different route. Erica is a Latvian company, and they use a filter which absolutely makes my heart sing. It is the Polyvox filter. They also have it in their acid box products. You can get it in Eurorack format. You can just get the filter. There's VCF3, which is the Polyvox run by an optical. This is a gorgeous sounding filter, and what it does is it lets you throw the resonance really high without losing the bass at all. It still stays super chunky, so it screams. It's got tons of headroom. This has a thicker sound. This has different tricks to it as well, and we're going to get into that. But it has everything that the 303 had. It has the same 2 oscillators, square and saw. It also has triangle, so it adds 1. It has accents. It has slides. You're able to pick the octave, but it doesn't even have like transposition steps for that. And you're able to build up rhythms by working with gates and ties. So it's a little bit different than clicking them in over here. It has distortion, and both these did include distortion, nod to Josh Wink, but it's just straight up on here. It has lots of other tricks. So it's got all the pieces that make these what they do. It has a different sounding filter, which is arguably better. Obviously, that's not going to help if you're going for a nostalgic hit. If you're trying to get a classic acid sound, it's not that. It's got its own character and tone. It has other tricks, though. Those other tricks are detune, which runs to a bucket brigade delay module, so it's not actually using multiple oscillators. Instead, it's sending left and right, or not left and right, it's sending a delay line ahead and behind of the signal. and then it's modulating them slightly to create a feeling of a detune. It's really unique. A sub oscillator doubles it below. It's really chunky. FM level. So FM level, this is between the LFO and pitch. Okay? So the LFO rate and LFO level will affect cutoff, but as you increase this, it'll actually affect pitch. It adds noise to the signal, so you can get noise, which increases the amount of bite that you can put on things, or you can just straight up use noise. That's just a sound effect. By the way, the FM level goes into audible rate. We'll get to that later. LFO. It has, in addition to accent and slide, modulation, where you can record modulations. So you can just hold it down, turn a knob, get it where it needs to be. Pitch envelope. So you can make this thing have a pitch envelope, which is how you synthesize drums. When you hit a drum, because the stick hits the membrane, it tightens and then it immediately loosens. So it has a quick doo, where the pitch is a little high and then it goes low. That transposition, that quick slide down, is called a pitch envelope. This has a pitch envelope, so you can actually make this very percussive sounding. Last step. This has last step. This has last step. You're able to pick odd numbers of steps. You can have 10 steps, 16 steps, whatever you want. Last step on here lets you, quickly pick what you want it to be. So you can do 3 steps and have it just do a triplet pattern, that kind of thing. Play mode, forward, backward. Transposition, you can straight up transpose. That's something these did pretty well. You can go into pitch mode and just click the key and then it'll maintain all of the harmonic intervals, but it'll transpose it to start on the new root note. Scale, you can pick the scales. This allows you to musically enter in things differently. Arpeggiation, it has a literal arpeggiator on it, in which you see white, 3 black keys, white, 3 black keys, white. Musical keys, okay? You can actually hit these and make music. It's a little bit off, but it works. LFO. The LFO is one which has several different patterns which can be selected here, and then the rates of them can be synced. So LFO rate will then be able to, instead of just being fast or slower in a linear fashion, it'll click through mathematical divisions. And that can be certain speeds as well as speeds that are not latched to the length of your pattern. So it's not just divisions of that. So if you have a pattern that has 16 notes in it, you can have an LFO which does a sequence of any division within. You can randomize, and then there's some stuff on here for clearing, copying, and making just editorial adjustments. It's a much more powerful synth. For acid, though, it still does acid. It's called the baseline for a reason. That's the tradition it works off of. They all have it. Baseline, 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 bass. We're going to do something with it now. Just quickly getting a pattern up. I'm going to go with a different kit too. This is where we left off. You may recall we were still doing 16th notes on here and we started to diverge on these. We're in the same key, so I'm hoping that I can make something that works with it. But we're gonna really play with it now. So what I'm doing is I'm playing with gate right now. Now I'm gonna play with some notes. accents to it now. 1. Then we're gonna do some slides. Cool. Now we're gonna do modulations. So what this is gonna do is this is gonna, anything on here can have a little bit of tweakage. Alright, now pitch envelope. 0, 0, so it's depth and length. Can you hear that? Pop. Put it here now. Really deep one. Cool. We're gonna add some sub to it. Too much. Some noise. Hold on, I'm gonna open up the filter. I want you to hear detune. There's that sweet spot. Okie dokie. Now we're gonna do some LFO stuff. Shift, LFO. This takes us into LFO. What you're seeing right now is an LFO going backwards. It's actually a sine wave. Saw. Ramp. Square. Let's hear it. Sample and hold, it's a randomization. Noise, also a randomization, but more granular. We're gonna keep it ramp. Now we're gonna go for sync. Divide by 8. On. sync now. All right, here's something important. We're gonna finish off with this. LFO, if you have it on FM, goes to pitch, but otherwise LFO level affects the cutoff rate, right? So the rate is the speed that it goes, right? The level is the depth, and this is the cutoff position, which means you can create FFM, filter, frequency modulation up there, if you go really fast with it, but keep it low. Now you can start getting formants. You hear that? Oh, one more thing. There's a bandpass filter. All right, thank you all, ladies and gentlemen. The Acid Show. We're gonna go way in deep with the Erica Synths DB-03 next on my channel. I hope you enjoyed checking out the comparisons between the TB-03 and the TD-3, driving everything with the Decay force. And break.